They were all laughing. The room glowed with polite warmth, a symphony of voices, glasses, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Someone mentioned a new show, another complained about traffic. Everything fit perfectly, like lines from a play that had been performed 1,000 times before. But you felt it, didn't you? That faint distortion beneath the laughter, the tremor behind someone's cheerful tone, the silence between words that no one else seemed to hear. You smiled too, but inside something recoiled. You wondered how everyone could live on the surface so comfortably, how they could talk so much and say so little. You sensed stories hiding behind every glance, fears stitched into every grin. And for a moment you thought, maybe the problem is me, maybe I'm too sensitive, too analytical, too much. But what if you're not broken? What if you're simply tuned to a different frequency, one that most people have forgotten how to hear? Most people don't want truth. They want comfort dressed as truth, soft enough to swallow, sweet enough to forget. They scroll, they nod, they agree, and they call it awareness. But awareness is not comfort, it's confrontation. And confrontation is what the deep mind was born for. Carl Jung once wrote that the greatest threat to humanity is not evil, but unconsciousness, the refusal to see what is real, the silent pact we all make to protect the illusion that everything is fine. You've felt it, that moment when your honesty makes a room go quiet, when your words feel too sharp for the fragile peace everyone's guarding. It's not arrogance that sets you apart, it's perception. You see the cracks others paint over. You hear the dissonance behind rehearsed laughter. You feel the tremor of falseness in a handshake. The world rewards those who can pretend. It pays well to be pleasant, efficient, untroubled. But the one who sees deeply will always be misunderstood, because truth and comfort cannot coexist for long. Jung called this the tension of opposites. Every soul is stretched between what it knows to be real and what it must perform to belong. Most people choose performance because belonging feels safer than seeing. But the deep thinker, the awake one, cannot go back. Once you have seen behind the veil, the play loses its magic. You can smile, but you can no longer believe your own smile. You can speak, but you can hear the echo of every unspoken lie in the air. You begin to understand why loneliness hunts the aware, because truth isolates before it liberates, because awakening costs the comfort of sleep. And yet, that is where transformation begins. When comfort finally breaks and something inside you whispers, "This is not who I am," the moment you stop pretending is the moment your real life begins. That is the first act of freedom. It starts quietly. You notice what others don't, the flicker of doubt in a smile, the tremor behind a confident voice. You sense more, feel more, and think longer than seems necessary. At first, it feels like a gift. Then it begins to hurt. There's a kind of exhaustion that comes from thinking too deeply in a world built for speed. You analyze what others accept. You question what others worship. You hold conversations that never leave your own head. And slowly, the world begins to feel distant, like you're watching from behind glass. They laugh. You analyze the rhythm of their laughter. They argue. You hear the fear beneath their certainty. They love. You notice how much of it is performance. You don't mean to. You'd trade all that awareness just to feel simple again. But simplicity is a door that closed behind you long ago. So you learn to mask it. You smile at small talk. You nod at shallow truths. You let people believe you're fine, because explaining your depth only deepens the distance. The irony is cruel. The more awake you are, the lonelier it becomes to stay awake. You try to fit in, but your mind keeps slipping beneath the surface. You hear too much, feel too much, know too much. And in the quiet you begin to wonder, what if awareness is its own kind of wound? What if understanding too deeply means carrying what others refuse to see? Carl Jung warned that when the collective refuses its own darkness, someone will carry it for them. That someone is often you, the one who cannot unsee, the one who absorbs what the crowd denies. This is the burden we don't name, the emotional labor of seeing clearly in a world that prefers blindness. The cost of consciousness is solitude. The reward, if you can endure it, is vision. But first you must survive the weight of seeing. Carl Jung believed that most of our suffering comes from confusion, the distance between who we are and who we pretend to be. He called the mask we wear the persona, the social costume we create to survive in a world that fears authenticity. You know this mask. You wear it at work, at family dinners, on bright mornings when you say, "I'm fine." It's not deceit, it's adaptation. The deep mind learns early that truth can make others uncomfortable, so you hide your questions behind a smile, your insights behind silence, your depth behind irony. But every mask exacts a price. Each day you wear it, the distance grows between your true self and your performed self. And somewhere inside, the soul begins to ache from pretending. Jung called that ache the shadow. The parts of you you were told to hide, intensity, intuition, sorrow, insight, don't disappear. They wait. They gather in the dark, whispering through dreams and exhaustion, demanding to be seen again. You think you're tired from the world's noise, but often you're tired from running from your own reflection. Look closely. The pattern of alienation is not random. It's the psyche's way of forcing you inward, toward integration, toward the parts of yourself you abandoned to belong. The loneliness you feel isn't punishment, it's initiation, a quiet invitation to remember what you buried to survive. Every deep thinker reaches this threshold, the choice between staying masked and walking back into the dark to retrieve what was lost. The world says, stay light. Your soul says, go deeper. And in that tension between mask and essence, the real journey begins, not toward more knowledge, but toward wholeness. There comes a moment when pain stops asking, why me? And begins to whisper, now what? You've carried the weight of seeing too much, feeling too deeply. You've been told to soften, to shrink, to stop noticing what others ignore. You've watched people praise your insight in one breath and avoid your honesty in the next. You've been both admired and exiled, often by the same hands. Carl Jung called this the journey of the wounded healer. Those who have been broken open carry within them a medicine that no textbook can teach. Their empathy isn't learned, it's born from survival. Their compassion doesn't come from purity, it comes from pain. You start to realize that your sensitivity is not a flaw but an instrument, that your depth was never meant to isolate you, it was meant to attune you. You feel the emotions of others not because you're weak, but because your nervous system has become an antenna for truth. The same wound that once silenced you now allows you to hear what others can't say. The same loneliness that hollowed you becomes the space where real connection can finally exist. To heal others is not to fix them. It is to sit in the dark with them, unafraid. It is to say, I know this place, I've lived here too. This is how the deep thinker becomes the healer, not through superiority, but through surrender, by allowing pain to refine perception until empathy becomes a form of sight. And yet even this transformation carries a warning. You can offer light, but you cannot live entirely for others. If you keep giving without returning to your own center, your gift becomes your undoing. Healing begins where self-sacrifice ends. Your task is not to absorb every wound you meet. Your task is to transmute, to feel deeply, but not drown. That is the art of depth, to walk through pain without becoming it. Depth without discipline becomes despair. To live awake in a sleeping world, you need rhythm, not resistance. You cannot think deeply about everything. Not every wound deserves your analysis. Not every silence needs to be filled with meaning. Depth is not about constant descent. It's about learning when to surface for air. Carl Jung taught that awareness must move in cycles, descent into the unconscious, then return to the surface to live what was learned. Without that return, even truth becomes poison. So you begin to practice depth as an art, not a reflex. You learn to create boundaries, energetic, emotional, intellectual. You stop trying to save everyone who suffers. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You give your insight where it can take root, not where it will be trampled. You begin to translate. Not every truth needs to be spoken in its rawest form. You learn to soften your language, to meet others where they are without betraying where you stand. You discover that clarity doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. You start to slow down. You notice how your mind wants to sprint through meaning. You teach it to walk instead. You choose stillness over noise, solitude over spectacle. You find peace not in detachment but in precision. The world will call you quiet, but you will know the silence is full, a cathedral built inside your own awareness. You stop chasing understanding like a finish line and begin treating it like a pulse, something that beats when you listen, something that guides you back to yourself. And slowly, life stops feeling like a battle to explain your mind and starts feeling like a practice of honoring it. There comes a time when silence is no longer enough. You've gone inward, you've learned your rhythm, but a truth begins to stir beneath the calm. We are not meant to stay alone forever. Every deep thinker feels this ache, the quiet longing to be understood without translation, not to be fixed or admired, but simply to be seen. And yet you cannot find your people by searching loudly. Depth doesn't advertise itself. It reveals itself through resonance. You start to notice subtle signs. The way someone pauses before answering, not because they're unsure, but because they're considering. The softness in a gaze that holds without judging. The questions that open doors instead of closing them. When you meet someone like that, something in you exhales. You recognize the signal beneath the static. You don't have to simplify your thoughts or dim your intensity. You speak, and they don't flinch. They understand that silence can be intimacy, that conversation can be prayer, that depth is a kind of home. Carl Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. That is how the deep recognize each other, not through likeness but through transformation. Finding your frequency isn't about joining a crowd. It's about finding alignment. Even one genuine connection can recalibrate your entire existence. So stop shouting your truth into deaf rooms. Speak softly where you are heard. Protect your language until it reaches those who can understand it. Because your people are not far. They're just waiting for you to stop pretending you're one of the shallow ones. We live in an age that confuses noise with truth. Attention has become the new currency, and silence, the new poverty. Depth is no longer celebrated, it's penalized for being slow. Everywhere the world demands immediacy, quick opinions, instant clarity, endless stimulation. We are flooded with information, but starved for understanding. The deep thinker becomes an anomaly, someone out of sync with the tempo of the machine. While the masses refresh their screens for updates, you linger on a single idea until it unfolds. While others collect fragments, you build meaning brick by brick. Carl Jung warned that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Technology has simply made avoidance faster and prettier. Scroll long enough, and you'll forget you even have an inner world. But here's the paradox. You can't outpace your own consciousness. It waits for you in every quiet moment, like a shadow leaning against the doorway of your mind. You can mute it for a while, with entertainment, productivity, distraction, but it doesn't go away. It waits until the lights go out, until the room is still, until your defenses fall, and then it whispers, "Remember me." To live deeply in this century is an act of rebellion. To slow down is to resist erasure. To think for yourself is to reclaim sovereignty over your own mind. The modern world rewards reaction, not reflection. But reflection is where the soul breathes. If you don't make space for it, your depth will suffocate under the weight of noise. So turn it off, the feed, the fear, the frenzy. Let silence recalibrate your signal, because in a world addicted to distraction, presence itself is revolutionary. For years you thought awakening meant escaping the world. Now you see, it means returning to it with your eyes open. You stop romanticizing isolation. You realize solitude was never the destination. It was the initiation. The point was never to stay in the dark, but to bring light back from it. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the merging of what you are with what you've learned, until your inner and outer worlds no longer compete. It's not about transcendence, it's about integration. To live fully human, fully conscious. You begin to understand that balance isn't found, it's created. In small rituals, in the way you choose your words, in how you respond when provoked, in how you protect your peace when the world demands your reaction. Depth no longer feels like heaviness. It becomes gravity, a quiet strength that keeps you centered while others drift. You no longer need to prove your insight. You no longer seek validation from the noise. Your life itself becomes your language. The deep thinker who once dissected everything now begins to experience instead. You allow sunsets without needing to define beauty. You listen without trying to fix. You rest without guilt. This is the paradox of wholeness. The deeper you go, the simpler things become. You learn that wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about being at peace with the unknown. Integration is not an ending. It's the quiet beginning of alignment. The moment your inner world stops echoing against the outer one and starts resonating with it, you don't float above life anymore. You walk through it, grounded, awake, whole. It began with loneliness, that quiet ache of seeing too much, of walking through a world built for shallow waters while carrying an ocean inside you. But look at what that loneliness became. It turned into vision, into discernment, into a compass that no one else could hand you. You once thought your depth was a curse. Now you see, it was initiation. Every sleepless night, every unanswered question was shaping the architecture of your inner world. The weight that bent you was the same force that built you. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that is what depth has always been trying to do, not to break you, but to reveal you. You are no longer haunted by your sensitivity. You are guided by it. You no longer fear your solitude. You rest inside it. You no longer resist the unknown. You bow to its mystery. The deep thinker does not escape life. They feel it completely. They are not above the world. They are woven into it, pulse by pulse, breath by breath. And when they look at the sky now, they no longer ask why it's blue. They simply marvel that it exists at all. Because the mind that once dissected everything has finally learned to love the living whole. So when the world feels loud again and your thoughts begin to spiral, remember, your depth was never the problem. It was the invitation to see, to feel, to remember that being alive, and truly alive, was always meant to be this intense, this beautiful, this real. If this journey spoke to something ancient inside you, subscribe and keep walking with us. There are more depths waiting to be remembered.